Are you having issues with your glass on glass piece, and are you getting that dreaded grout bleed? Well, in this video, I'm going to share with you my tips that will help avoid that grout bleed. And I'm also going to share with you other tips that hopefully will help you create that perfect glass on glass piece. So let's get into the video. When it comes to mosaics, everyone has their own preference of adhesive that they like to use. And that's especially true when it comes to creating a glass on glass project. You're going to hear of conflicting reports from different people saying which one's going to be the best adhesive to use, which one's going to be the easiest adhesive to use, which one's going to have the best clarity of adhesive to use, because everyone has their own preference. And even in this video, I'm going to give you my preference of adhesive to use and what I consider to be the best adhesive for a glass on glass project. Now the first one is Prep Multi-Use Adhesive. This is an Australian product made by an Australian company. It's available through some online mosaic retailers and some independent chain stores, but it is not available widely and it's not available through Bunnings, so keep that in mind. It has a high water resistance, is non-toxic, and it's a very good general product to use. It's a very good product to use for glass on glass. Then we come to silicone. Now I'm going to speak quite generally here because there are many different brands of silicones and also there are many different types of silicones. Now generally silicones contain solvents and those solvents are continued to be given off whilst the product is curing, so it's not very good to use long term. Now they're good if you need an adhesive with a bit of body. Now they do tend to get a yellow tinge over time and it's not noticeable when you're using semi-transparent glass, but it does happen. Soudal Crystal Clear Fix-All, which is an SMX polymer, doesn't have any solvents. It's similar in how it works to silicone and it's good if you need an adhesive with a bit of body in it. It's a very thick consistency. So it's very similar to silicone but without the solvents. Well Bond, it's non-toxic, it does take longer to cure, and it's water sensitive, so it will return back to its original state when it comes in contact with water or moisture, because it is just a PVA. So if you're using Well Bond for a glass on glass, and then you go and grout your piece, because of the moisture in grout, it can make the Well Bond revert back to its original state, which is white. So then you have to wait for it to dry clear again, which can take many, many months. So just keep that in mind. It has a fairly thick consistency and it's a bit thicker than, say, Prep Multi-Use Adhesive. Mac glue. Now, Mac glue is non-toxic. It's not widely available. It has issues with the cold weather, but that is overcome. So that's not really a major issue, but you need to keep it at room temperature. It has a high water resistance. Mac glue has also said that it's actually waterproof when it is fully cured. However, the bottles say it is water resistant, but Mac claims it is waterproof when it is fully cured. Now it's made specifically for glass on glass by an artist. It has a thin consistency. It's expensive, but you don't need much. And to be honest, it's my preference for a glass on glass. Now when it comes to choosing glass for a glass on glass piece, it's very important that you choose the right glass. You need to make sure that the side you're going to be adhering down onto the substrate is very smooth. You don't want that side to have any undulation or any texture in it whatsoever. Because if it does, you risk the chance of getting grout bleed. Because you need a very good bond between that glass and also the glass substrate. And the only way that that's going to happen is by having a very flat piece of glass. So make sure that if you're going to have any texture or any undulation, that it's in the top side of your glass piece rather than in your bottom side. Now I'm going to show you how I choose my glass. Now this is just my way of doing it. Like every project there's many different ways, but this is just how I choose it and I tend to get very good results. Now if I'm looking at a piece of glass, I like to make sure that I analyze it, turning it over, looking at it and going, I can tell instantly visually that this glass is textured on both sides. Now to make sure of that, I get my thumb and my forefinger, and you can use any part of any one of your fingers, and I just put it one on each side and I just rub it gently. And I can tell instantly how textured that glass is. This glass is not going to be suitable for a glass on glass piece because it will allow grout bleed to get in underneath because you're not going to get a good bond between the tessera and the substrate. Now when I'm doing this, I always make sure that my hand is kept totally away from this area here. I don't want to rub and have that against my hand because I could cut myself. So I tend to grip it like that, and I put it in there and I just gently rub it. I'm not pushing hard, just very gently doing it. And I can even turn it over or turn it around and do it this side as well, just to make sure. But this glass is quite textured, so I would not be using this for a glass-on-glass piece. This one here, again, I'll do the same. And I can tell by looking at this, that this is textured here. And I can tell that the other side would be okay to use because that's flat. This one here is totally flat on both sides. So again, I would use this piece for a glass on glass. This one here, I can see there's a bit of texture in here, and I can also see that there's a bit of texture here. So if I'm using this piece, I would be cutting out the piece that's flat in it and not using the textured piece at all, unless it's on the top side. Now when it comes to pieces that are very, very textured, again, you do the same thing. And I can see that this side, or I can feel this side is totally flat. So I could use this, even though it's textured on top, I could actually use this piece without a problem, making sure that this is the side I'm going to adhere down and not this side. Now here's a larger piece of a different glass. And again, rubbing gently across there, I can tell this side's very textured. And this side actually has a texture on it as well. It's actually an undulation, which means this, to me, I would not be using for a glass-on-glass piece. And these are just some small pieces I've actually cut to do as a demonstration. And these are red and purple, and these are both totally flat. And I'm also going to break up some glass here that I've scored. Whoops, got to put those around the other way. I'm just quickly breaking this up because we can use some of this so that you will get a better idea on how well you need to push down on your adhesive and your tessera to give it a good bond with the substrate. So that will be coming up very shortly. And again, be careful. You don't want to cut yourself. So that will be coming out very shortly. What I'm going to do now is bring out one of the important things that I love to use to create a very good glass-on-glass piece. So I'll get that now, and then when we come back, I'll show you that. Now this is what I use to create a glass-on-glass piece. It's called a light box, and I find it comes in very handy and in some cases invaluable. Now this is an LED one, and what I like about an LED light box is it gives off a very lovely, even white light. You can purchase fluorescent ones where they have fluorescent tubes in them, but in a lot of cases you can also get those quite cheap, or in some cases they will give them to you because it's old technology. These are quite slimline, the LED ones, and they do come in different sizes and different thicknesses. This one I've had probably for around about 10 years from my original company, and so therefore it is quite heavy. But that's only due to the technology inside it and the type of perspex that's in there as well that gives off that nice even glow throughout. It also gives off a lovely even heat on top. It's a very, very gentle heat that it gives off, which is very important if you're doing a glass on glass. You don't want anything that's going to create a thermal shock to your glass substrate. Now, one of the advantages of this, and there are a number of advantages, but one of the advantages to this is that if I'm choosing glass, I don't have to, it's semi-transparent glass, I don't have to hold it up to the light all the time. All I have to do is bring it over and I can see instantly what it's going to look like in a window. Whereas normally before this light box, I would be holding up pieces of glass in the window to see what it was going to look like. So that in itself saves me time. But anyway, what we can do is we'll turn this on. I will run through some tips that I consider to be important and that I think will help you into creating a successful glass-on-glass piece without grout bleed. Well, this is what it looks like with the light box on. And as you can see, it's got a very even light throughout. And that's the white LEDs inside it that do that. When it comes to fluorescent light boxes, you do get hot spots. And that's why they create them so deep, to try and avoid those hot spots. But they still work anyway. It's just these are better. Now, the glass, if I put this on here, see how you can tell instantly that that's a lovely deep red. And that's the beauty about having a light box. I can see, imagine if this was the glass on glass piece, I could see these colors instantly and I could go, yes, that goes with that, or that doesn't go with that, or whatever the case may be. So I find this works really well. Now I'll remove those, and this is the substrate I'm going to be adhering to. And this is just a small piece of clear glass. And I don't know whether you can see that, but it's just there. I'm going to zoom in so that you can see it. Well, I'm pretty well ready to go. I have added a blue piece of masking tape around the outside because I found that just made it easy to frame what I'm doing. When I didn't do that and I put it on the light box, you couldn't see where I was working. So I just thought I would put that there to make it a bit easier. Now, whenever you're working with glass and doing a glass on glass or a glass substrate, always make sure that the tessera, your stained glass, and the substrate is very, very clean. Make sure it doesn't have any residue on it. And if you're using a cleaner, make sure that cleaner doesn't leave any residue behind either. And also make sure that the oil, if you're using a glass scorer and you've got it with oil, make sure that you wipe that off too and clean it, because you really don't want to have that oil interfere between the bonding of the substrate and the tessera or the adhesive. Now, MAC, which I'm going to be using and demonstrating to you today, likes to be kept at room temperature. MAC doesn't like the cold. If you're in a very cold environment where it freezes, and if MAC freezes, the glue has been totally destroyed. So don't keep MAC in a cold garage. I always keep it in at the house at room temperature or close to room temperature, and I find that works really well. At least if it's going to be in a cool environment, always make sure MAC is climatized to around about room temperature before you use it. And in fact, I like to make sure that the substrate and the tessera are also at room temperature. But in saying that, if you don't have that option, at least make sure your MAC is at room temperature. Now, you do need to wipe the tessera, the top of the tessera, as you go if you happen to get MAC on the tessera. Do not leave the residue on top of the tessera because you won't remove it unless you use some pretty aggressive removers like acetone or something like that. So to avoid that from happening, have a damp rag, and once you've done a couple of bits, wipe it over with the damp rag to remove any residue. Because it's not like Well Bond, where Well Bond is moisture sensitive, and that will probably come off when you grout. But MAC glue, it will not. So wipe it off as you go on the top of the tessera if you happen to get some on there, because you want to remove that residue. Now, use small pieces of tessera. Now in this particular case, this is about the largest I go with, and this is what I like. This is about the size I like to use. The larger you go, the slower curing the process will be. And especially if you're using Well Bond, it will slow that process down further. So I like to use around about that size or smaller. I mean, you might be able to get away with a bit larger if it's you're using a light box and there's a bit of warmth coming from the light box, as this is. It's a nice gentle heat. Nothing major, but it's just there. I'm going to now adhere some tessera down, and this is what I do. Now, there's many different ways of achieving the same outcome, but this is just what I do, so just keep that in mind, and I'll go through a few other hints. Now, I'm going to be using MAC glue because this is my preference of adhesive to use for a glass on glass. Now, one of the things you don't do with MAC glue is shake the bottle, because that will add air bubbles into the adhesive. Now, I used to actually shake MAC glue and I could still get the air bubbles out, but it's by far better not to have the air bubbles in the first place. If you have a really warm room and you were using MAC, it can become quite thin. So only nip the top of the cap off a little, because you can always take off more if needed further down the track. Now, if you happen to nip too much off the cap, or if you want to decant this into another bottle, you can do so. If you find this bottle may be big for you to use, you can just get another bottle of glue that you find is easy to handle with and may even have a better applicator tip. You know, something like a school glue or something like that. You know, something cheap. Tip the contents out, wash the bottle out, and then you can decant the actual MAC glue into another bottle of your preference. As long as it has a good applicator tip on it, and as long as it seals very well, then you can do that with MAC glue. So anyway, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually show you how I adhere the tessera down to create a glass and glass piece. Now just remember, this is my way of doing it. It's not the only way, and you may have a better way, but this is just what I do, and I find it works really well for me. Right, we're good to go, and my tessera is all clean. So what I like to do is only use basically a drop, maybe 2 drops, but generally I can get away with 1 drop. So I'm just going to put 1 drop there, and that's it. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to get my piece of glass, my tessera, and put it on like that. And the MAC glue will start spreading. Then I just put firm pressure. Hope you can see that. There you go. A bit of firm pressure, and the MAC glue has gone to the edges, which is what you're looking for. You want to make sure that the MAC glue goes to the edge, but preferably just past the edge of the tessera, and that just makes sure that you don't get grout bleed, because if you're using flat tessera stained glass and your substrate is flat, then that bond is going to be very, very good, and that just means that the adhesive, or rather the grout, will not be able to get in underneath once that has fully cured. So let's do another one, and I'll do a red one here, and again, just a drop. That's all you need. Of course, you know, if you're using a bit larger test, well, then you might need 2 drops, but put it on and then push down firmly, but not hard. And it grabs. And as we can see here, there's glue all the way out there. Now, when you're doing this process, the beauty about this is that you can see any air bubbles. You can see if there's, you know, your glue. So what happens is when you push down, you can actually see the glue pushing away, and also any air bubbles underneath there pushing away as well, because you really want to remove those. I actually don't mind a few air bubbles underneath the tessera, but what I don't like is grout bleed. So pushing firmly really does squeeze out those air bubbles and the excess adhesive. And the beauty about using a light box is you can see that happening. So it's not like where you're doing it on a table, it's not backlit, and that still works, but this way you can actually see it happening underneath the glass. So let's do a clear piece. And like I say, you don't need much. There you go. And again, we're going to push firmly, but not hard. There you go. And you can tell because the clarity of that is beautiful. You can see that the glue has gone outside of the tessera lines, which means you're not going to get glue marks. Because some people say, well, if you put glue around the outside of the tessera and not in the center, that works. Well, it may work, but the problem is that glue, if it doesn't cover the whole back, can leave glue marks. So we'll do another piece with the purple again. We'll give that another push. There you go. So really, I consider this optimum if a bit of glue goes outside the tessera. Now, what happens if you put too much adhesive down? So let's try that. I'll use the purple again because we can probably see the purple a lot easier than anything. So I will put it next door to this.
Okay, so that's now a whole heap. That would probably do 3 or 4 pieces of tessera, that in itself. So let's put that there and let's squash that. There's air bubbles. So we're pushing down on that and that gets rid of the air bubbles. But in the process, that's quite a lot of MAC glue and it's going to fill up that grout line. Now with MAC, you don't want to leave it in your grout lines if there's not enough room for the grout. So what I generally do is I get in a cotton bud in between and wipe that out. Now you can squish that cotton bud down with your finger, just a little bit if it's a narrow grout line, which mine usually are, and I just put it in there and just wipe it out. And I can go all the way around so as it's not going to interfere with the other pieces. And of course, if I have got too much glue, I roll the cotton bud as I go, so it creates a path for the glue to come away from. There you go. And that also clears the grout lines and it also makes sure that the edges of the tessera are sealed as well because you're actually wiping the glue away on the edge. So it does 2 things there. So if you put too much MAC on, don't be too concerned about it. But what usually happens is when you've been working with MAC, and it doesn't take that long, is you generally are able to just apply the right amount. You just know what the right amount is. So I'll just now put another white or clear piece of glass, and I'll put that in the middle there. There you go. Again, not too much. Push that down. And this must be hard to see, I know, because I can just see it using the clear. There you go. But it is amazing when you do it this way, you can actually see the clarity of the adhesive under the glass, which means that you aren't going to get grout bleed, providing that the adhesive goes to the outside of your tessera and you're using flat tessera. And also the warmth from this light box is going to help cure this adhesive quicker than if it was just on a bench. You can do this on a bench without an issue. I just find a light box does make it easier for me, but that's a personal preference. And that's all I do. And I find this works exceedingly well for me. So anyway, I hope you've taken something away from this video. If you have any comments, maybe you've got a better way of doing it, or perhaps you're using other adhesives, put them down in the bottom of the comment section of the YouTube channel. I would like to have a read and see what everyone's using. And I'm sure others would too, because I know this has been an issue with a lot of people on how to do a glass on glass piece so as you don't get grout bleed. This is my way. It's not the only way, but it may help you out. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the video and I'll see you in the next one. Enjoy.